September 13th, 1989. New York City. The air is heavy. Late summer heat clings to the streets of Manhattan. Traffic moves slowly. Taxi horns echo between concrete walls. Inside a black Lincoln Town car, a man sits quietly in the back seat. He is not nervous. He has no reason to be. His name is Carmine Galante, and for years, he has been one of the most feared men in organized crime. A few blocks away, federal agents sit in parked cars. They've been watching him, not just tonight, for years. Galante isn't just another mobster. He's a symbol, a relic of the old mafia, and a problem the new mafia can no longer tolerate. To understand why this night matters, you have to go back to the rise of a man who refused to follow the rules. Carmine Galante was born in 1910, Lower East Side, New York, Italian immigrant neighborhood, poverty, violence, survival. He joined street gangs early. By his teens, he was already known to police. By his 20s, he had found his place. The mafia. Galante became part of what would later be known as the Bonanno crime family. At the time, it was one of the 5 families controlling New York. Power was everything, and Galante understood power better than most. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't charming. He was cold, efficient, brutal. By the 1940s and 1950s, Galante had already built a reputation. Drug trafficking, hijackings, violence without hesitation. If someone needed to disappear, Galante was the man they called. In 1957, he was arrested. Narcotics charges. Heroin. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Most men would fade away. Most men would be forgotten. But Carmine Galante didn't fade. He waited. Prison didn't weaken him. It hardened him. And more importantly, it gave him time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to build connections. When Galante was released in 1974, the mafia had changed. New bosses, new alliances, new rules. But Galante didn't care about rules. He had one goal: take control. At the time, the Bonanno family was in chaos. Its boss, Joseph Bonanno, had been forced into exile years earlier after internal conflicts. The family was fractured, weak, leaderless, perfect. Galante stepped into that vacuum. Officially, he wasn't a boss, but in reality, he ran everything. His headquarters? A modest restaurant in Brooklyn, Joe and Mary's. It didn't look like much, but inside, deals were made, orders were given, futures were decided. Galante's real power came from one thing: heroin. During the 1970s, the mafia had a silent agreement. Officially, no involvement in narcotics. Too risky, too much law enforcement attention, too dangerous. But quietly, everyone was involved, especially Galante. He built one of the largest heroin pipelines in America. Sicilian connections, import routes, distribution networks, millions of dollars flowing through his operation. He didn't hide it. He didn't share it. And that was the problem. The other families, the Gambinos, the Genovese, the Lucchese's, they watched, and they grew concerned. Galante wasn't just making money. He was breaking the balance. In the mafia, power is shared, controlled, managed. But Galante wanted more. He wanted everything. He surrounded himself with loyalists, many of them Sicilian-born, men who answered only to him, men who didn't respect the traditional American mafia hierarchy. This created tension, dangerous tension. Inside the Bonanno family itself, resentment grew. Capos felt sidelined. Profits weren't being shared. Decisions weren't being discussed. Galante wasn't leading. He was taking over. And in the shadows, whispers began. He's out of control. He's bringing too much heat. He's going to get us all killed. The commission, the governing body of the mafia, began to pay attention. Galante had crossed the line. More than one. He ignored orders. He expanded narcotics operations. And worst of all, he acted like a boss without approval. In the mafia, that's not ambition. That's betrayal. By 1979, the decision was already forming. Galante had to go. But killing a man like Carmine Galante was not simple. He wasn't careless. He traveled with bodyguards, armed men, loyal men, and he was always watching, always calculating. But even the most dangerous men have routines. Joe and Mary's restaurant, Brooklyn, lunch meetings, cigars, wine, a predictable pattern. And in organized crime, predictability is a death sentence. The plan didn't come from one family. It came from multiple, a quiet agreement. A rare moment of unity in a world built on mistrust. The Bonanno family itself would play a role. That was the key. Because no outsider could get close enough. Only someone inside. Someone trusted. And somewhere in Brooklyn, the final details were being discussed. No loud conversations. No written plans. Just quiet words. Careful looks. "It's time," someone said. The order was given. Carmine Galani was marked for death. September 1979. The heat hasn't broken yet. The city moves like any other day. But inside Joe and Mary's restaurant, everything is about to change. Galani sits at a table in the back patio, a cigar in his mouth, a glass of wine in front of him. Two men stand nearby, bodyguards, watching, waiting. He looks relaxed, untouchable, because for years he has been. But tonight, the rules of the mafia will be enforced, and the message will be clear. No one is bigger than the organization, not even Carmine Galani. Outside, three men approach. They don't rush. They don't hesitate. They walk in, and in a matter of seconds, the entire underworld will change. July 12th, 1979, Brooklyn, New York. The sun hangs high over Knickerbocker Avenue. Inside Joe and Mary's restaurant, lunch is being served. Quiet conversations, clinking glasses, the low hum of a neighborhood that doesn't ask questions. In the back patio, Carmine Galani sits at a table. A cigar rests between his fingers. Smoke curls slowly into the air. In front of him, a simple meal. Bread, wine, calm. Around him stand his men. Closest are two trusted bodyguards. Cesare Bonventre, Baldassare Baldo Amato. Both Sicilian-born. Both fiercely loyal. Both armed. They are watching everything. Or at least they think they are. What they don't see is that the danger is already inside. At the table, two other men sit with Galani, members of the Bonanno family. Men he trusts. Men who have been part of his inner circle. They don't speak much. They don't need to, because they already know what's about to happen. Across the street, a car door closes softly. Three men step on a sidewalk. No rush. No panic. Just purpose. They walk toward the restaurant. Inside, Galani takes a slow sip of wine. He looks relaxed, but his eyes are always alert. For years, he has survived by reading people, sensing danger, acting first. But this time, there is nothing to read. Because the betrayal isn't visible, it's already decided. The three gunmen enter. No masks, no hesitation. One of the men moves quickly. A sawed-off shotgun appears. Another pulls a handgun. For a split second, no one reacts. Then, gunfire explodes. The first shot hits Bonventre, point blank. He drops instantly. Amato reaches for his weapon, but he's too late. More shots, more chaos. Galani doesn't move. Not at first. Witnesses would later say he remained seated, cigar still in his mouth, as if he understood, as if he knew this was how it ends. Then the gunfire turns toward him. Bullets tear through the table, through the chair, through his body. Glass shatters. Wine spills across the floor. Within seconds, it's over. The shooters don't linger. They don't look back. They walk out. Calm. Controlled. Just as they came in. Inside Joe and Mary's, silence falls. Three bodies lie on the ground. Carmine Galani, Cesare Bonventre, Baldassare Amato. The cigar is still in Galani's mouth. A message. Clear. Unmistakable. This was not just a hit. This was an execution. Minutes later, sirens fill the street. Police arrive. Then detectives. Then federal agents. They already know who the victim is. They already understand what this means. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't personal. This was organized. Approved. Sanctioned. Inside the restaurant, investigators examine the scene. Bullet casings. Blood patterns. Witness statements. But one detail stands out. The men sitting with Galani are alive. They were there, at the table, closest to the violence. And yet, they weren't touched. Detectives notice immediately. That doesn't happen by accident. One officer says quietly, because in mafia killings, nothing is accidental. The conclusion is unavoidable. This hit came from inside. The Bonanno family itself had allowed it, maybe even helped plan it. Within days, word spreads across New York. The underworld understands. Galani didn't just die. He was removed. The commission had acted. The message echoes through every social club, every backroom meeting, every quiet conversation between made men. No one is untouchable, not even a boss. Behind the scenes, the real story begins to surface. Galani had ignored warnings. Repeatedly, he had expanded heroin operations without approval, refused to share profits, pushed aside established leaders, and most dangerous of all, he had surrounded himself with loyalists who answered only to him. This wasn't just ambition. This was a threat to the structure. The mafia isn't chaos. It's control, hierarchy, balance. And Galani had broken that balance. So the commission acted. According to investigators, the approval likely came from the highest levels, leaders of the five families. A rare consensus, because if Galani could act without consequences, others might follow. And that would mean war. The hit itself was carefully coordinated. The shooters, likely associates trusted by multiple families. Men who could enter without suspicion. Men who would not hesitate. But the most critical role was played by those already inside. The men at the table. They didn't intervene. They didn't warn him. They didn't move. Because they knew. Because they were part of it. Later, one name would surface repeatedly. Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano. A Banano Capo. Another. Philip Rusty Rostelli. The official boss, recently released from prison. Galani had sidelined Rostelli. Ignored him. Taken control without permission. But Rostelli still had support. Still had influence. And with the backing of the commission, he had the power to act. The hit restored order, at least on the surface, but it also exposed something deeper. The mafia was changing. The old generation, men like Galante, who ruled through fear and violence, were being replaced by men who understood something else. Discipline, structure, secrecy. Because law enforcement was getting stronger, the FBI had already begun building major cases, using wiretaps, surveillance, informants. The days of open defiance were ending. Galani represented a past that the mafia could no longer afford, and his death was a turning point. But for investigators, the case was far from over, because while everyone knew why it happened, proving it was something else entirely. No one talked. No one cooperated. Witnesses remembered little, or claimed to, and the men responsible remained in the shadows. For now. But the execution of Carmine Galani had set something in motion, a chain of events that would slowly unravel the mafia's silence. Because for the first time, cracks were beginning to show. And soon, those cracks would turn into something far more dangerous. Not bullets, not betrayals, but something the mafia feared even more. Men who talked. Summer, 1979. Brooklyn is quiet again. Joe and Mary's restaurant reopens. Tables are cleaned. Blood is gone. But the memory stays. Carmine Galani is buried. No grand ceremony. No public mourning. Just another name added to a long list. In the underworld, life moves forward quickly. It always does. Philip Rusty Rostelli quietly reasserts control of the Banano family. No announcements. No headlines. Just meetings. Decisions. Power returning to where it was supposed to be. The heroin pipeline's slow. Operations are restructured. Profits are redistributed. Balance is restored, at least on the surface. But beneath that surface, something has changed. Because Galani's murder was too public, too bold, too obvious, and law enforcement is watching closer than ever. The FBI had already been building cases against organized crime. But now, they had something else. Momentum. Agents begin re-examining everything. Old files, old names, old connections. The Banano family, long considered unstable, becomes a priority target. Surveillance intensifies. Phones are tapped. Meetings are followed. And slowly, the walls begin to close in. But the real shift doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. Early 1980s. A new kind of weapon enters the fight against the mafia. Informants. For decades, the mafia had survived on silence. Omerta. The code. You don't talk. No matter what. But pressure changes things. Fear changes things. Time changes everything. One of the most significant cracks comes from a man connected to the Banano family. Salvatore Donnie Brasco Pistone, an undercover FBI agent. For years, he had infiltrated the Banano crew, built relationships, earned trust, including with Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano, the same capo whose name had been whispered after Galanti's death. Napolitano had unknowingly brought an FBI agent into the inner circle, introduced him to made men, included him in meetings. A catastrophic mistake. When Pistone's identity was finally revealed in 1981, the consequences were immediate. Panic spread through the Bonanno family. Who else could be an informant? Who else had been talking? Trust disappeared overnight. And in the mafia, without trust, there is nothing. Napolitano was called to a meeting. He knew what it meant. Everyone did. No arguments. No explanations. Just a quiet acceptance. He walked in. He never walked out. His body was never officially recovered. But his fate was clear. Execution. Not for betrayal, but for failing to see it. The irony was impossible to ignore. A man involved in one of the most significant internal betrayals had himself been undone by another. And this time, it wasn't the commission pulling the strings. It was the FBI. Throughout the 1980s, the pressure continued to build. New laws, stronger cases, more aggressive prosecutions. The RICO Act became the government's most powerful weapon. For the first time, leaders could be charged not just for individual crimes, but for running entire criminal enterprises. And the Bonanno family was directly in the crosshairs. Philip Rostelli himself would spend much of the next decade behind bars, convicted on racketeering charges, sentenced to long prison terms. The leadership weakened again. Instability returned, and the cycle repeated. But something was different now. The mafia wasn't adapting fast enough. The old ways, violence, intimidation, silence were no longer enough. Because the enemy had changed, the FBI wasn't afraid. And more importantly, they weren't playing by the same rules. Wiretaps recorded conversations once thought private. Informants revealed secrets once thought buried. And slowly, the myth of invincibility began to crumble. Looking back, the execution of Carmine Galani wasn't just about power. It was about control. The mafia had eliminated a threat, restored order, maintained its structure, but in doing so, it exposed itself. The boldness of the hit, the internal betrayal, the coordination between families, it all left a trail, and that trail led investigators deeper than ever before. Galani had believed he was untouchable, protected by fear, by reputation, by the rules of the organization. But those same rules are what killed him. Because in the mafia, loyalty only goes so far. When power becomes dangerous, when ambition threatens the system, there is only one solution: elimination. No warnings, no second chances, just a decision and a gun. The men who ordered his death continued on. Some were arrested, some died in prison, others faded into obscurity, but none escaped completely, because the world they helped build was already collapsing, and the execution that shocked the underworld became something else. A signal, not of strength, but of vulnerability. Because for the first time, the mafia had revealed its greatest weakness. It could be divided, and once division begins, the end is only a matter of time. Today, the streets of Brooklyn look the same. Cars still pass Joe and Mary's old location. People still walk by without knowing what happened there. But history remembers. A summer afternoon, a cigar, a table in the back, and a man who thought he controlled everything until the organization he served decided otherwise. Because in organized crime, there's only one rule that never changes. No matter how powerful you become, no matter how feared you are, the system always comes first. And when it decides your problem, it doesn't negotiate, it erases you. Late 1980s, early 1990s, the aftershocks of Carmine Galani's execution are still being felt, not just inside the Bonanno family, but across all 5 families of New York. Because what happened to Galani becomes a reference point, a warning, a precedent. Any boss who grows too powerful, too independent, too reckless, can meet the same fate. But something else begins to change. The commission itself, once the ultimate authority, begins to weaken. In 1985, federal prosecutors launch one of the most devastating cases in mafia history. The commission trial. Bosses from multiple families, including leaders of the Gambino crime family, Genovese crime family, and Lucchese crime family, are indicted. Some are convicted. Some receive long prison sentences. For the first time, the leadership of organized crime is publicly dismantled. The structure Galani once tried to dominate is now under siege. And the irony is unmistakable. The same system that ordered his death is now collapsing under its own weight. By the early 1990s, another turning point arrives. A boss of bosses, a man feared across the country, stands in a courtroom. John Gotti, leader of the Gambino family, convicted, life in prison. The era of untouchable mob bosses is over. And when investigators look back, they see a pattern. Internal betrayals, power struggles, executions meant to restore order. Each one weakening the organization from within. Carmine Galani's murder was one of those moments. Not the beginning, not the end, but a turning point. A moment when the mafia chose control over chaos and unknowingly opened the door to its own decline. Because every execution, every betrayal, every internal war left cracks, and eventually, those cracks became fractures. Fractures the government didn't create, but simply exploited. Today, the mafia still exists. Smaller, quieter, more careful, but nothing like it once was. Because the old world, the world of men like Galani, died in places like that Brooklyn patio. Not just from bullets, but from the realization that even the most powerful men are disposable. And in the end, that is what destroyed them.